Hello and welcome to another We Are Developers Live. I just thought about something. I wanted to tell my cousin to actually join in because he's a big gamer fan and we got a guest today. He's all about gaming. And I forgot about it. But okay, well, I mean, I guess there's no chance to him to see it right now,
You
or I
never
can
know.
call him. I shouldn't call him on the show. That's just rude. And we have
Yeah.
intermittent mobile connectivity in Berlin right now because there's power outages and there
Oh
was
wow.
like attacks on the power grid, and I don't know what if they fixed it or if they're gonna fix it anytime soon.
That's
It's
commitment.
interesting though, like I mean, I remember in New Year's, like you send out your text messages at like 10 o'clock instead of midnight because at midnight the whole system would crash, and that was for decades. And nowadays you go to a rally here in Berlin and there's like 600 people, 6,000 people streaming live on Instagram on one mobile mast
That's
and it doesn't
true.
crash. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, you're right actually, because there's a big festival sort of near us as well, and it was about 2 years ago. It suddenly started to work. You know, where people could actually kind of make phone calls because usually when it would happen, it's a bit like Notting Hill Carnival. As soon as so many people are there, yeah, everything jams up. But now, is it 5G? I don't know. I don't know. I have no idea about the technicals of how any of that works, but it does now.
Yeah. Yeah, the Nautical Carnival was always hilarious because it's basically you knew you're gonna spend the day and a half there because the tube stations were closed within like 2 hours, and it was just a great experience. If I ever get a chance to come to London and see Nottingham Carnival, it's pretty bonkers. I mean, I don't know if it's nowadays anymore, but I saw Goldie live in a Ronnie Size playing on a truck, and it was just really good. It was
It's
just an
still
amazing
bonkers.
experience.
It's still that way, yeah. You always hear the negative reports, but usually it's kind of very positive. But yeah, there you
Yeah, I
go.
was also impressed with like one police officer without a gun holding back like 600 people that were basically not misbehaving at all. I was just like, there was a lot
Mm.
of respect I saw back then. It was interesting to see. I don't know if that's still the case, but we'll see. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Oh, look at
Anyways,
that, an earthquake.
you have an
Just me
earthquake?
hit. Oh yeah, I hit my camera, my microphone, and everything all in one go. So there's probably a nice bit of noise there. It looked like I was in an earthquake for a second.
Okay. I remember first time I was in California in an earthquake. That's just a really bizarre feeling. That's not supposed to move. I mean, it's supposed to move, but you don't feel the movement normally. But like, it's not supposed to move up and down. And yeah, it's a really strange feeling, and that's why all the buildings in California are just horrible quality because they're supposed to crash in without people dying in them. Like
Oh,
our buildings would be far too sturdy for a place that is known to have earthquakes.
oh
So
yeah.
yeah.
Everything's made of brick in Europe, isn't it? So it would just fall down. But yeah, I think we probably kind of take it for granted, that we live in like Europe, so it's kind of pretty. Word boring is not the right word there, but pretty non-eventful when it comes to that kind of thing. Other than like, I mean, we catch up every week and talk about the weather, and it's always like, yeah, it was slightly colder than it was last week, and that's about it.
Well, I always felt like being a weatherman in England must be the worst job on the planet. Like, yeah, it's going to be terrible tomorrow again. We don't know. It might be like three seasons in one day again. We're not quite sure. Like, but
It could be
yeah,
the best job though. That could be the best, if there's no expectation for you to get it right. Imagine if it was in a programming kind of context and they said, well, you deleted the database and we no longer have an application to talk of, but well done, you did your job. It's like you tried your best. It's kind of like
I
that,
was just
it's a
I was
50-50.
just thinking if that has an impact. Like, if European developers are actually writing sturdier code because their buildings are sturdier as well, whereas in California everything is meant to collapse and be replaced every few years, and that feels like vibe coding, doesn't it?
It could feel like old world, new world way of thinking. Maybe it's that like I think we had someone from Google. Was it Clement Farabee? And he said in his Coffee with Developers episode, he was talking about like we build infrastructure to last, and we probably don't realize quite how long that infrastructure is going to last. And then that makes you think of, I mean, he was using like the analogy of like Roman roads or like viaducts and things like that. But we were also talking a couple of weeks ago with one of our guests about changing things from like COBOL code to cloud, and so it's kind of that infrastructure is there, and it's still hanging around, even though we like to think that these kind of big applications that we use are going to be like the new sexy framework. They're not. They're just really old school, but it works.
Well, not sometimes boring is good, which is a terrible segue because we have somebody right now as a guest who's anything but boring.
Mhm.
But like today, I'm very excited to have somebody here who spoke at our Congress as well, and that's Johanna Pirker.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Thanks so much for the invitation. I'm super excited. How are you doing?
I'm good. Johanna is a real life professor, and that's like a proper professor, not like in Harry Potter, where it's just basically because the position is cursed and nobody wants to have it. But I mean, you just moved from Graz in Austria, which is affordable and beautiful and wonderful, to Munich, which is basically the most expensive place to live in Germany. What was the reason for that?
This was an interesting way to starting this conversation. um, yeah, no, like so basically I'm in between the two places now, but actually like I'm a professor at Graz still, and I still have a research group on games research and virtuality research there. But I also moved to Munich now because I had the opportunity to start here as a full professor, which is like academically something which is really, really, really a great chance to have. And here I can build upon a very interesting environment because, as you might know, Munich is also super known for the film industry, which is super interesting if you work in games because there are so many lovely bridges. But it has quite an interesting startup scene, entrepreneurial scene. So I think there are so many interesting chances here as well, and I hope to build some bridges also between the Austrian and the German research field in this through that.
I saw that you're hiring, that you're looking for students right now as well.
Yes. Yes. So this is exciting. So we're building this new group from scratch. So we're at the moment looking for interested people in joining us with PhD positions or postdoc positions in the realm of games research and like intersection of VR and AI.
I mean, that is incredible. I didn't know that was already a position in academia in Germany and in Austria, because I would expect them to be like 20 years behind and just basically see computer games still as a toy rather than as an educational tool.
So that's interesting. So basically, the framing of games as a toy. We could talk about this later because this is actually something which is super interesting to look at because some games are designed as toys, like the simulation games. But this is like a very that's why like I need to pick up this definition framing. However, you're absolutely right. So I think in general society, but also at some research places, I do have to admit that games are certainly not seen as the proper, I don't know. First of all, big industry because the games industry is making more money, making more revenue than the music industry, than the film industry and the book industry combined. So it's a huge industry. It's a huge push for innovation. So as you might know, especially, I think many of the developers do see what innovations are coming out of game tech. So whether it's like this push through the GPUs from us gamers who always wanted to have faster games, or like also a lot of network technology is being researched there. So that's why like World of Warcraft is working perfectly since 20 years, and you can fight with 100 other people's imaginary dragons, whereas every Zoom call, like also this one, started with, hey, can you hear me or no? So it's quite interesting. So the tech is super interesting. And also, as you already mentioned, and has so much potential for other fields, whether it's medicine, whether it's education. So it is quite a pity if some people, also researchers, do not see games as a proper tool for other fields, because also game tech, like game engines, whether it's the Unreal Engine or Unity, is pushing quite hard to the boundaries of what can be also done in other disciplines. So game engines like the Unreal Engine is already being used in the movie industry for Mandalorian, for instance, to rethink virtual productions, but also digital twins. So you can like really like sort of easily. It's not rocket science, however, to use a game engine to make a digital twin or something. So there's so much potential, and it's, I don't know, a pity if this is not seen.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we're going to deep dive into that later on in the show because that's your guest topic as well. We normally go through a few current features as well that might not be that much of your expertise, but I just wanted to mention them a bit and get a bit of a daily introductory here going on. And yeah, you're totally right. There's so many options that, like, I always saw gaming as like hardcore test for hardware and for also for languages and to see where they're going. And then I was a browser creator, so basically we always were far behind what engines could do. But then we also a lot of game stuff was also very much close to the hardware or dependent on the hardware, and on the web you never could actually say you need a better graphics card to see that happening. We cannot ask our users to do that. So let me share some of the resources that I collected for this one here, and I have one thing here which we wanted to get a bit more of a handle on timing this show. So I now have these buttons here that basically then show us how far down we are. So this is like 10 minutes we plan for that, and then we go for like 5 minutes for the weird gig thing and the other one, and then we come back to you, and of course we want to have your input on these things as well in case that's interesting for you. Now, one thing that was happening 2 days ago and already was remediated was a huge NPM attack. So basically, there were packages that were poisoned to do, I think, some Bitcoin mining and all kind of things in between, mostly on the client side. But it was just like all of these packages, if you're using them in production and you have updated 2 days ago and not updated since, very much a good idea to update that right now, because your machine might be part of a bot network without you knowing it. And I think this is an interesting concept to me, because I hardly use any third-party packages. Of course, in games development, you're just basically reliant on them all the time. But on front-end development, I always found it very bizarre that we became so dependent on our third-party components. And this actually shows how brittle that system is as well right now. So this was the first like concentrated attack on NPM on several packages, and these had like 8 million downloads a week together. Yeah. And that's the first thing that fascinates me. Why would you want to download 8 million packages a week from NPM all the time when your system could cache them? That's the thing that confuses me here. Is it vibe coding? Is it these kind of things? Dan, what do you think?
I mean, I'm just looking at what the packages are as well. And like some of them, I understand that they might be popular. I mean, I can't imagine what they would do necessarily. Like color name is arrayish, but there's one that's like simple swizzle. I mean, it's surprising these have got so many downloads. I'd actually kind of like to look at the list and see like what are these? Are these sort of things that people could do with taking a little bit of time to actually write it themselves? Is it just a package that, is such a tiny utility that it gets a lot of downloads, and you would think it would then be more difficult to actually introduce a vulnerability into it, because if there's so little code, you would imagine it would be easier to spot. But I'd just like to know how they targeted them. If it was just pure numbers, like popularity, NPM packages that get a lot of downloads or not. Because it does actually say on that article, it says 2.6 billion weekly downloads every week. So yeah, it's massive. So it must have just been a quantity game, the ones with the most downloads.
Or basically down the dependency tree, and you basically don't know where it is. It might be like one dependent on another, and then you're just down the trap there. The other big thing that happened, of course, is that Google is off the hook with selling Chrome. So that was a big question, of course. Like Chrome was supposed to be sold because it's a monopoly. Now they don't have to, but they have to share data with rivals, whatever that means. So I found that fascinating to see, because I mean, it's also 17-year-old now, Chrome. So there was another post that actually said like what's all the cool stuff that's happening about Chrome and what they did over the years. But it was fascinating to see who actually stepped up and wanted to buy it. I mean, there was like Anthropic, there was Ecosia, which offered to take it for free, and the other one offered to get like a few billion whatever dollars. And it was interesting to see that a browser connected with a company that is also search, being a monopoly, can actually wreak havoc with the web quite nicely. But it's now they're off the hook, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the data sharing stuff. So, I mean, I've used Edge as my main browser since I started working on it, and I don't work in it anymore, but I know what's in there. That's why I'm still doing it. Johanna, what's your setup? You're a Chrome person. You're an Arc person, or is a browser something that you care about, or is it just something you use?
No. Obviously, I grew up as a computer scientist, and I had all the phases, and I was like a very strong Linux user all along. But honestly, at the moment, I go with the Chrome setup because it comes with so many interesting add-ons, and it is quite interesting as a developer tool. It had very early on already so cool developer features, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, Firefox was the first to do it, and it was basically an extension called then Firebug. That was actually the first one that gave me a chance to actually dive deep into things, and I'm gonna come back into that in the Weird Geeks thing later on. But yeah, it's just, I think it's like 73% market share now, and 11% is the next one, which is Edge. And I think it's just a matter of like giving up, because I mean, when Edge moved to Chromium as well as the engine rather than its own engine, it was because of that, because developers basically didn't bother to actually do other things. They just wanted to have what Chrome does. And that was basically the question that we always got. Now, there is a games browser, Opera GT, Opera GX. Have you tried that one? Because it sounds fishy to me. Or is it just me being prejudiced?
I honestly, I have no idea. But it's quite interesting to see what is going on these days, because there's a lot of more and more games are moving towards web builds, right? And as you already mentioned before, like the current browsers, not all of them can support this, because especially Chrome and multitasking is sometimes a little bit of a issue. So specific gaming browsers, there's a lot of research being done that you have specialized browsers to support you to enhance a gaming experience and multitasking experience. I'm not sure, doesn't Opera also have something
That is
specific
Opera
there?
GX that I meant,
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I mean, when you go to like dodgy websites, it automatically downloads it for you in the background. That was the thing that made me like wonder what the hell is going on there. But it would be interesting to talk to somebody from Opera. I know a lot of people that used to be in Opera, they're now in Vivaldi. And because it was sold to some micro lending company in between, and then it did some Bitcoin mining in the background, much like Brave did. And I have no idea what's going on there, but like it's interesting, because I even saw ads on German internet that basically said like, oh, it's the browser for gaming, so you should be using those.
Yeah, also like the more like handheld versions and are using also separate operating systems and so on and so forth. So there is so much more coming these days in that regard. I have no idea where we're going with that. I just don't hope that there's will be like 1,000 solutions for everything again, and that there will be
I
one or
mean,
two.
my Amazon Fire TV tells me to install Luma and play games on it, and I mean, it takes me about 5 seconds to go through the menu of that thing. That's the lag that TV has. It's about 8 years old, so I'm like, yeah, good luck with like a AAA game running on that thing. That's gonna be a slideshow.
Yeah. But like the game streaming, that's another Pandora's box you're opening now.
Yeah.
This could be something which is super interesting to look at, and I think I don't know, like I think every year we're saying this constantly, but maybe the coming years will be one of those times where we finally have a proper game streaming setup.
So Interop 2026 is coming as well. So if you're actually annoyed about browsers not doing things like multitasking, for example, as you said, this is basically where the browser makers meet in a room and fight each other and do the cool thing and focus on like what should be a new standard. So this is a really, really good idea to actually read that and go through it. Every browser maker has a post about it. Safari has one, Chrome has one. This is the Edge one because I'm still on that RSS feed. So there's lots and lots of stuff that they're actually discussing what they should be using and what ideas they have. One of the proposals was an XSLT 3.0 proposal, because Chrome said they're going to move XSLT out of the engine, which I mean, I used XSLT the last time in 1997 and 1999 to build the McDonald's website, so I'm not quite sure if it's going to be that missed, but there's lots of discussions about that going on right now, so that's an interesting one. Now, the other one is like, Dan, that's up to you. The browser maker, the browser company, which is like a cool name, they did Arc, and that was basically everybody told me to use it, and I didn't have the time to do it. And by the time I did it, it became defunct. and then Dia, which is now the browser, and they just got bought by Atlassian for 610 million in cash.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. I mean, I think the thing that surprised me the most about this really is that, like, I mean, you pointed out about a month ago, Chris, I think, that the Arc had become, it sort of seemed to be that they were in some kind of like not supporting it or moving over to Dia more so, and that they were kind of like sunsetting it, but like very quietly. And then this news comes out that they've sold it. And I haven't actually tried Dia, but what I've understood about it, I've seen it, is that, you know, it's this kind of combination really. It's where like a kind of ChatGPT chatbot meets your kind of standard browser. And so I think this story is interesting because, you know, Johanna, you said about 5 minutes ago, like, you know, who knows where this is going? Like, I have no idea where this is going. And I feel like that's really where everybody is, you know, especially with browsers and search in general. But a big brand like Atlassian has obviously just jumped in and tried to, you know, hedge its bets in the saying that the browsers are going to become this kind of chatbot type application that are not quite, you know, what we kind of recognize a browser as right now. So yeah, it's interesting, especially seeing a big player put so much cash down in one go. They're obviously pretty confident that browsers are not going to disappear, but that they are going to change. So yeah, it's quite interesting.
I guess it's also a thing where basically Atlassian wanted to do a lot of stuff in AI themselves, but they basically like, why not buy a browser that has it built in? And but yeah, I was just amazed by that number. It's just like, I mean, where the German government is currently trying to find 70 million missing in their budget, and that's 610 million for a browser. So I'm just, the way we play with numbers in our market is just completely off kilter. Last thing in the main section, there's going to be a webinar on 16th of September where I'm going to talk together with Rudy and Ivana about how the Congress went, and we're going to come back to that with how we surprised Johanna to bring her on main stage later on. So if you want to learn about like how your employer branding means nothing to developers, that's where I'm going to be playing bad cop, and Rudy's going to be good cop. But to move on, because we actually passed the thing already. Now, Johanna, you might know what that is, but I wondered, have you ever seen this?
I had a look earlier, and it's quite interesting. This is this cheating device which gave access to what? Oh, there we go. And I do love this topic because I was writing an article a little bit earlier this month about the idea of how cheating, hacking were really the start for so many game devs in general, but also the democratization of game development. And this is really like also something which was pushing so much forward the democratization of computing in general, because back then all the systems were closed, right? And also like all the game engines were super secret and super closed. And it started, like, one of my favorite example is a hacking group in Peru. This was around someone called Mr. Byte, and I cannot remember, I think that the Eagles or something like this, like a very fun hacking group basically. And so many stories about how games have been hacked in the past to make it, for example, accessible for the local community, because most of the games have not been translated, so you only had the English versions. But if you were living in Peru, you would need the local language, obviously, to make it accessible for people. So people started to hack the games, and by doing so, by making it accessible to their people, they also learned how to develop games. Then they started to add the other languages, then maybe an extra level, and all of a sudden, like, entire game development communities emerged, like, about that. That's why I do love this reference.
So yeah, the story behind it is basically, this is the action replay, and the Commodore 64 had a fixed RAM, 64K. 108 megahertz, like, and he had a few chips that did different things. One did sound, one did video. And what that one allowed you to do is actually either reset the machine on this button or actually freeze it. So this one actually would take the memory of the main computer and store it into this device. And then you can start messing around with it. So that was a chance for you to actually see what's going on the screen and what can be changed. And there were all kind of tools in there for you to analyze the different parts of it as well. So you had like a sprite monitor where you can see the animations of the game, like the sprites, and you can flip them around. So you had like helicopters jumping on the whirly bit rather than the main bit. But the main thing for me was I was shit at games, and basically I was really bad at them. So I used this to actually give myself endless lives. So there was a poke finder in there that would do it automatically. That normally didn't work with most of the games. But the trick was to actually on screen you had the amount of lives that you had left, and that was a special place in memory. So you actually just freeze the thing. You went to that, looked at that number, looked at the address where that is, and then you hunted through the whole memory to see which part of the code changes that number. And if that number was like -1, then you basically overrode it with 3 NOPs instead of the DEC command, and then you had endless lives. You could also turn off sprite collision with the background and sprite collision. So that was actually how you gave yourself endless lives. And then you tried to find a space in the memory that wasn't used by the game, and then you wrote your trainer menu and like all the cool things that you did back then. And you could actually save games as well that didn't have a level skipper. Like basically most games back then, you played them, and when you died, you started from scratch every single time. But in this case, you could take a freeze and create a zip of it, so to say, and store it on a floppy disk and then play it next day. So instead of getting stuck that way. And I found it fascinating that this thing basically made me the developer that I am right now, because when I then became a web developer, it was the same thing. I looked at the website and I looked at view source, and I'm like, oh, that's how they've done it. And even like penetration testing, even security testing, you're like, oh, are they filtering out that input element? Or are they filtering out that link? Or can I just write something in there with the developer tools and then actually start hacking the website that way? So that was the fascinating bit to me, that the taking a snapshot of something and analyzing the snapshot was to me also what web development always was. Like before we actually started wrapping everything in 6,000 divs and 15,000 different libraries, and it was just a very, very. I just saw it the other day when I went through my cupboard here, and it's so interesting to see that by not being good at games, I analyzed games and I cheated myself to like endless lives. And also then later on, I started developing games for the C64 and for Game Boy Color and all the different things, all of the 6502 processor bits. And this, I think, is something that we should never forget, that this is very, very important, that as a developer, I should get access to things. I should be able to look under the hood and actually start playing with things rather than like, here is a package and please hope that we're going to make a feature in the future. When you said earlier, Johanna, that extensions in browsers, that's exactly what people do as well. They find functionality that's missing, write an extension, and then the browser takes on that extension functionality into the core later on. So I guess we're totally over time, but that's okay because I'm skipping the rest. The other bit is also that interesting bit of news is that the basic 6502, which was the C64 basic back then, is now open sourced on GitHub. And you can actually, the language itself, and you can actually understand the language. And what I found most amazing was this one here, is that that on GitHub, it says that it actually was sent on GitHub 48 years ago. And I think that's basically Hanselman putting his power into GitHub, because that can't be a thing right now, but that's happening. So Microsoft Basic is available for us as well. So I think we just jump into it. So Johanna, you spoke at our Congress. We surprised you with putting you on main stage. First of all, how was that? Like, how did you feel about that?
A little stressed because it was very last minute, but like super fun. I come to this conference like every year. I think since so many years, I already feel like really being part of the inventory, how I would like put it in a German way. And then being on the main stage, especially just before John Romero and help me.
Warren Spector?
Warren
Warren Spector.
Spector, this was something which was really perfect because obviously like both are big idols. I do have to build a bridge now because of what you just said about this hacking culture and learning through that and getting excited about that, because also people like Romero were huge supporters of seeing the potential of modding, for instance, because modding and before it became official modding was also basically coming from exactly this scene, that we wanted to always find out what is going on, like in this hacking field and this finding out what is going on in the game and then making small extensions. And games like, I think it was Quake, were one of the first ones trying to push this forward in a more official way. And then this whole modding community started, and games like Skyrim probably and so on and so forth. Many of those games really lived through the modding community and continued to be very interesting games in a world where they normally might have been outlived already. So just just to build a bridge. So this was super exciting to also share the stage directly with them, who are obviously both big idols. Yeah, and but it was before my talk. Of course, the talk was super ready already. We are in the academic world. We are never like a little bit late with everything. But yeah, no, I do love this conference, and I'm always excited if I can be part of it in any way.
Well, they threw me in the deep end as well, because I didn't know that I'm going to have a fireside chat with Warren Spector and with John Romero as well. So, but I found it through my whole career, being respectful is important, but being like shell shocked when you meet somebody important is basically the worst thing you can do. And actually treating them like a normal person gets you a lot of access to different doors that are normally closed to you. You know, it's like, I've never seen when I worked at Microsoft, I talked to everybody, no matter what director or like boss that was. And because we were sitting at lunch or something and they were walking by. And I always find it like that when people get to this stage and you feel at both, Warren seems to be this like really nice guy. And John, when people get up to him and start like seeing him as this like untouchable hero, he feels very awkward in that. He just doesn't like it at all. He's like a very normal, down-to-earth person, and giving people that kind of feeling is probably a good idea to get yourself to get to know people. I mean, Dan, you probably had the same in the music industry when you were playing in a band, that when you had opened for other bands that were super famous, they were basically liked it when you approached them in a normal manner, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just that like being authentic, isn't it? And it's like when you see somebody like Warren and John when they're sitting in those talks, what I liked about them is that they almost aren't aware quite of how much of an influence they've had on the audience, because I think, you know, they know that we're like a developer first group, so that might not everybody is going to be a games developer, but most people have these kind of nostalgic feelings about games in the same way as they would like music, you know. And so sometimes you want to get up there and just say to that person like, I love this game, and just go at them with everything you've ever thought you want to say to them. But you know, it is I agree with you. What we're saying about seeing John have somebody fanboying him, John Romero, it's very sweet, because he's not quite aware of quite how much of an impact he's had. And I think that's lovely, because it shows he was just making games because he loved them and thought other people might love them too, and didn't realize quite how much. So yeah.
Same with you.
I love that you're bringing up this reference between games and music, because it's quite interesting how both of them are currently influencing each other. Because one thing I talked about, like John, I have already met a couple of times at all different conferences around the world. And it was there's one thing which I find super interesting, that which is also super obvious in Quake and Doom, is the influence of music on their games. And John Romero, for instance, is a huge metal fan. And so the thing we talked about was about the last Nine Inch Nails concert, because it was quite fun. Like both him and me were able to go backstage for the Nine Inch Nails concert. And the fun fact is, backstage, at whatever show, it was full of game developers. And it's quite fun because Nine Inch Nails made the soundtrack, Trent Reznor, for I think Quake back then. And now Robin Fink, who is the guitar player of Nine Inch Nails, just founded a couple of years ago his own studio and is releasing his own game together with Corey Davis next year, a horror game. So it's quite interesting how these two worlds, the rockstar world sort of and the gaming world, are like super combined. And yeah, it's one big family.
I wonder if just to jump on that.
There might be a company called Rockstar. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. Like, rings a bell, maybe.
It's that kind of world building thing, though, isn't it? It's like the crossover between fantasy. You know, I think of a friend of mine who he does a combination of playing in a band and touring, and then writing scores for things like video games and trailers and things like this. It's very orchestral music. Now he's been a big fan of sort of everything from Lord of the Rings through to like Warhammer, through to anything fantasy. He was into it. And I think it's that, isn't it? It's that kind of where you find there is this strange crossover between metal, which people think, when you look at people that are into metal, I'm a big fan of metal. The band I was in was a metal band. You don't think they're going to be kind of nerds. You think they might be aggressive or angry, and they're not at all. They're the kindest people on earth, but also really into fantasy and nerdiness.
There are so many cool crossovers. So like Tim Schafer, who originally made Day of the Tentacle, made Brutal Legends, and you can find the original voices of so many stars like Lita Ford. Then obviously Ozzy is featured there, and he's building this huge metal fantasy. Blind Guardian is part of I can't remember the name. Of a fantasy game. There are a lot of, like, I recently heard that the bass player of Sabaton is creating a game about a metal festival tycoon simulator, basically. So there's so many fun crossover stories, especially in the world of metal. And like I do have to point this out. I made a YouTube video about 10 different examples how metal and games interfered. So I do love this topic.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to watch that. I think that's fascinating. Chris, I knew we had to win the resources, didn't we?
Germany also had this Wacken festival, which is like the biggest metal festival, and basically people said like if you want to attack the German IT infrastructure, this is the week to do it, because everybody's got to be shit-faced who's actually working there.
There's so many IT people, computer science people, tech people at Wacken. It's crazy. This is so fun.
Yeah, I mean, also the crossover with Nine Inch Nails is interesting because they did the soundtrack to Watchmen, the TV series, as well. So they were into movies before, and they did. And what I loved about them as well was when they did that Ghost album, the Ghost 1 to 4, that the first one was released as Creative Commons, so people could actually remix it in any which way they wanted to. And this was like a really, really cool way of covering the open sourciness of our stuff, and that music and film is getting into that same idea right now. I really love that.
And Trent Reznor, so the singer and like the main person behind Nine Inch Nails, was or is chief creative director officer at Apple, at Beats Music or something like this. So they're like, he's also very involved in many of those. He also used to be the new roadie for Ministry back then, before he actually became a musician. So it's we're going down rabbit holes here again, but I really love the rabbit hole enthusiasm that comes with that. And as you said, like the modding bit and games being extensible is a big thing. I mean, the big thing to talk about, of course, there's Minecraft, especially to bring it back to education. I'm fascinated what people do in Minecraft. I mean, somebody did like a working 6502 processor built in Minecraft. So you can actually, somebody rebuilt the processor in Minecraft bricks. I don't know how that works, but somebody did it. And that was like a 12-year-old Swedish person that was snowed in over the winter or something. I don't know. This is crazy. So Minecraft is one of the best resources to get people excited about tech and about engineering and about it's like I think Lego was always a really cool tool to get people thinking and experimenting. But Minecraft, especially if you combine it with there are so many things you can program, you can extend how it's a huge toy for people who want to be creative in any form. So I'm a huge fan of Minecraft. I mean, as a tool, and there's like cultural wise, tech wise, so many interesting projects in there. There's this I don't know if you know that one, the Play Oasis project. This is basically when we want to talk like think about Gen AI. What are the next steps? Because at the moment everything is generating text is already working really nicely. Images, videos, we're getting there. But what could be the next step would be interactive experiences. And also, they trained a lot of Minecraft videos. And basically, it does not really work super well, but it gives you an interesting idea how it could move on. So basically, the training data was Minecraft videos, and now you can sort of play the game, which looks a little bit like Minecraft, and it's just like predicting basically what the next move would look like if you go forward, if you look up, if you create something. It's quite impressive if you don't know this.
Well, I mean, it's been like that for quite a while. Like AI in games has been like intelligent enemies and these kind of things has been a bit where it was much earlier than the mainstream and ChatGPT made it boring. I remember the Force Awakens games by where you basically just there was this demo where they just threw characters into a room and they tried to cling onto the wall not to fall down. So basically you didn't have to program that. The machine tried to survive itself and tried to avoid being shot and these kind of things. I think that's a very interesting idea that AI has been in games for very beginning. I mean, it's like it goes back a long time. I remember like that one. I mean, all the different ghosts had different ways of moving, so they had actually characters, and that's fascinating to see that they even thought of that for that processor environment that the original Pac-Man was made for.
This is super interesting what you're saying because again we do have a lot of conversations and important discussions, also the ethical discussions which we need to have these days about generative AI in games. But we need to point out that, as you say, AI in games has been there already for decades, really decades, and there is a lot of some things are rather the illusion of AI, so not the same AI what we would understand as computer scientists. So it's rather about making the enemy look smart, but the truth is it's like it cannot be that smart because it would always outsmart us. But there's another on the other side of the coin. It's quite interesting. It's not only AI in games, but also games for AI research. So games have always been a massively important platform to train the current AI models. So whether it's like you might remember the first headlines, wow, Kasparov, the chess grandmaster, has been beaten by an AI system. Back then, this was not really rocket science because AI has chess has a very small branching factor, so you can sort of predict what are the potential moves. However, really big moves were done when StarCraft 2 back then was for the first time beaten by Alpha Star, it was called, from DeepMind. And it's quite interesting because games like StarCraft, they have like a really huge branching factor. So there are so many possibilities every single microsecond, millisecond. And basically, it's not deterministic. You cannot have all the information. So it's really complex, but it's still a small, closed, formal system. So it's super interesting to think about training AI agents in there in this system because it's still similar to our real world somehow. So you can use it then for self-driving cars or for drone systems to train those systems there. But again, it's was always used by companies like DeepMind to train their agents. And the fun fact I have to add here is that the last Nobel Prize for chemistry was given to the co-founders of DeepMind, and one of them is Demis Hassabis. They got the Nobel Prize for chemistry, for protein folding, for AlphaFold, I think it was called. And Demis Hassabis used to be the AI programmer of Black and White, the video game.
Oh,
So
cool.
this is like my great hope. This game's researchers might become Nobel Prizes at some point in the future. I'll stick to that.
I mean, there was also in machine learning, there was lots of stuff before. I remember that too many Marios example, where basically they made a machine model play Mario world with like 50,000 Marios at the same time, and making sure that they go through it without dying and learning from it. And that also got into like self-walking machine robots and these kind of things that learning. So it's an interesting one. I remember a few years ago there was also the idea of making a game by playing the game. Like there was this by what was it? It was like a Worry Dream guy, and it was really interesting to see like that you play a level of a jump and run game, and that is then the perfect solution to play that level, rather than like, and then you actually throw random things in to make sure it's not that easy to do. But and there was also an indie game that allowed you to turn back time and do jumps backwards in case you got stuck and these kind of things. So there are so many cool cool game mechanics and ways of interacting with it. And then AI became mainstream, and everybody said it should be a chatbot, right?
Yeah. But it's so many cool things you can do in combination machine learning, and so we do a lot of research in there. So things like what you just mentioned, for instance, why would you want an AI to play a game? This is something which we do quite intensely, because this is super interesting for automatic balancing, to make it more accessible to people with who might want to play with specific handicaps, but also to make it like tested, like infinite, like all the infinite versions. This can be also very lovely. And machine learning, we do use a lot to, for instance, automatically recognize toxic behavior. I could say cheaters now, but we mentioned forward that this could, this is, yeah. But to identify toxic behavior, for instance, automatically, and then try to predict who might become toxic and try to integrate them to the game in the most positive way to sort of prevent that they become toxic at all. So there's so much potential if you mix AI systems, machine learning with games.
I'm getting 90s vibes from you right now, because your microphone, your mobile phone seems to be interfering with your microphone. I hear this burp, burp, burp sound that I hadn't heard since the 90s. So I don't know what's going on there. This is really incredible. Because I remember these gaming like speakers, when it's that like before your telephone would ring, they would do the 3 sounds and then the telephone would ring, and I just got the same sound. That was really bizarre.
Oops.
Cool.
I was wondering about from like a game, if you're building a game and you've got AI, and okay, this is going to sound like a very silly question, but it's just something I've never really thought of until now. So if I'm playing an online game and it's got AI in it in 2025, is it going to be sort of all self-contained, like, so it's all local, you know, that all of that AI-ness is now just like a kind of flow chart of decisions being made by the characters, and it's kind of been boiled down to something that's not really AI, but it's just, like I say, a complex flowchart? Or is it going to kind of doing external, like almost API calls? You know, it feels like that would get very expensive and very like would lag your software, I'd imagine. But can you explain how that works? Because I've just never really thought of it until now, how AI is packaged in the game.
Yeah, it really depends. Like again, the term AI in games is something where I need to mention very often is the illusion of AI. So most of the systems are not really cost intensive or resource intensive. But to answer your question still, if we do have more heavy systems which want to have online calculations, it really depends on the sort of game. If you do know that this is a game where the user is very likely to have a very strong client, then you can calculate it client-wise. If it's some sort of a game where you might want to stream things, if you send some packages and you do have the capacity and the sort of game, but also the sort of target group would work with the system, you could also make server calculations. But again, it always depends, right, on the target group. If this is a game where it's very less likely that someone does have a very lovely machine with a very good modern GPU, you might want to avoid those calculations anyway. So it really depends on the sort of game and the target group.
Well, you talked about that we do like image generation and we do like audio generation and also music generation. But of course, there is like even before we thought about AI, there was like generative art in games and endless game maps because they actually became generated as you go. Do you think that's going to be a bigger thing as well? Because you want kind of to limit your World of Warcraft, but at the same time, it's much easier nowadays to get it generated for you rather than planning the whole thing out, right?
So you're opening a Pandora's box. So what we had in the past was always the procedural content generation, where you have one smart formula or algorithm which is creating then the full world with you. For instance, like a world like Minecraft is always created from scratch based on Perlin noise. And this is something, again, which has been existing in games for decades. This is also something it was really inspired by limitations, because back then the memory was very limited. So people who wanted to still have a huge universe in a game like Elite, 1980 something, they needed to be smart, creative, and really think about the resources and how to make a smart algorithm to make a full-fledged world happening. These days, with generative AI, there's an entirely different discussion. Because again, this is this ethical discussion I mentioned earlier. So a lot of game developers, game designers, artists, sound designers, and so on and so forth do have absolutely correct concerns, because this was trained often eventually on data which the companies might not have had the rights to use it. So it's not really clear, for instance, for the images and so on and so forth. I mean, we do know this discussion. I'm not sure if we want to open this Pandora's box these days. And a lot of companies are now reworking a little bit the ideas, if they use, for instance, those tiny LLM systems based only on the internal artist data, for instance, on their consent, to make sure that they are being paid in a proper way and the art is being introduced in a proper and ethical, nice way, but also artistically interesting way. Because let's be honest, like you can see it very often if some of the games being released these days do have a lot of AI assets in there. Same is true with sound and so on and so forth. But what is quite interesting, and this I want to point out as a very interesting new chance, because back then we have been excited about with procedural content generation that we can all of a sudden have those really open worlds, which is then always a little bit of a balance between if it's too open if it's like obviously not created by our game designers train of thought and inspiration, you might still lose the inspiration or the spirit of the game designer, basically. I hope this makes sense. So because we sort of have a vision, we want to give this to players, we want to have an open world, but we still want them to have a certain experience as a game designer. So it was always a little bit of a combination between using those open worlds, but balancing in a way that the game designer still have a full control of what is happening. And the same is true now, not only with the world, but with stories. And this is quite an interesting research and development perspective we're having these days. So that we don't only have the open worlds, again, infused by the game designer, but that we also have open stories with LLMs, for instance, where we can replay the game in very different ways, where we can talk with NPCs in ways we were never able to talk to them before. So we might have a very different kind of game, kind of genre of game in the future. Not only open world, but open story. And this I find super interesting.
We had a
I
guest here on the show, and Dan was interviewing them in detail. That were doing their startup from Austria that actually allow you to create stories for your kids with the kids as the main character. So Dan, can you quickly give a recap on that one? Because that might be what Johanna was talking about as well, like the storytelling thing that became very formulaic
Yeah.
if you just use a simple LLM.
Yeah, I think so. They were sort of saying in some ways it was borrowed from those old books, you know, the ones that you would decide your own story, and it was sort of, if you say yes to this person, go to this page. And they said that it was this idea of like really hyper personalized experiences. And so things like games, like you're saying, could be there's certain parts of the game we've got in common, a certain mission that we've both done, but there could also be parts that you experienced that I didn't, you know, which I think is what you're kind of you know, suggesting there, Johanna. But then in this book, there's a similar for this company, rather, they're called Oscar Stories. In their books, they have a similar idea that you have similar stories, but with different outcomes, depending on the type of person that the child is and what the parents might want the story to say. And so it can have a different kind of focus and maybe a different lesson that the young person learns. So it could have a similar story, but they just put more of an emphasis on something that they want them to learn. So it's like you're saying there, the AI part is the part that just, I mean, almost organizes, filters out, includes, you know, different parts, almost like modular parts of the story to make something that, even if it's not completely bespoke, which goes back to what you were saying, Johanna, about it can feel like it's AI, even when something isn't entirely AI. So yeah, certain parts of the story they'll feel bespoke, whereas in reality, they're actually just a number of modular pieces put together to make something semi-unique, if that's even a word. So yeah, it is very interesting. It's interesting how it's empowering us to take control of stories ourselves.
Semi-unique, okay.
Semi-unique. It's almost contradictory, isn't it? But you know, as close to unique as you can get, yeah, without being unique.
So I want to go back to the prejudice we had at the beginning. Like, I mean, you are an educator and you're a games fan, and you're basically very much like into the you built games, I guess, in the past as well, and you're teaching people about the bits. What prejudices do you still have to fight, and how do you attack them?
Basically, all of them. I mean, like, obviously, especially in a woman in this field, and I'm not only relating to games, but also computer science. We do fight tiny wars every day. Honestly, like, even though like I'm in this field already quite some time, and I'm probably rather known in my world, there's so many, I don't know, fights we do need to fight. Whether it's again being a woman in this space, being again what you're referring to, being a gamer. This is also something. Also, because we talked about metal, metal is also one of those things where people constantly have a lot of wrong ideas and what someone who is listening to metal is supposed to look like, how a computer scientist is supposed to look like, that games are just dumb and making us stupid. So I do feel like in general, whether it's games or any other topic, we do need to rethink how we're thinking and how we're talking to people. So for instance, if I go to a games conference with some of my friends, or to other events, if I am the woman and I'm next to a man, they will always think I'm misplaced, or like very often it's that I'm being asked, oh, and what are you doing here? Are you the partner? Are you the +1? Are you the social media manager? What are you doing here?
God.
And this is like constantly like being pushed. Still it's also not only like something which you would think it's like all generations. It's also young people having those train of thoughts. And again, that's why I constantly say, whether it's being a gamer, whether it's being whatever you are, just ask people what they do, who they are, what they want to talk about, and we need to get rid of all of those stereotypes. And when it comes to games, let's be bold. It's this constant I give talks about games all the time, also to audiences very outside of the gaming world. And I always get the same questions about violence and about addiction. But so if I would go on stage as a filmmaker who just made a documentary, so I make learning games, I go on the stage, talk about my learning games, and I will be asked about addiction. If I go as a filmmaker and talk about documentary, would I get asked the same questions about violence in those brutal action movies, or about like porn addiction and pornography? Probably not. So there's still this really old-fashioned concept about how people think about games and don't see how diverse and colorful it is. It's like the film industry or the book industry. Not every book is great. Not every book is good for you. The same is with games, but games are so much more these days.
I mean, there's also the old prejudice of like that people got violent after playing computer games, and that has always been a thing. Like, I mean, the same with metal. I mean, like in the 1980s, there was this big thing like, oh, everything you play backwards is like satanic verses and whatever. And I mean, a lot of people are like, okay, some people were inspired by computer games to go into the school and shoot people, but that's basically that's the wrong angle to think about it. And it's not the game's fault. It's actually there were lots of things broken before that. And it's just fascinating to see that there's always this fight against that. But basically, you're right. Like a filmmaker does not get asked about the most outrageous and bad things about their market. Whereas, like as a games developer or as a games maker, you are. And addiction is a big problem, but it's also an interesting thing that like I mean, there are people that were addicted to like color games on their iPad, you know, like and spend millions of dollars on that one, or thousands of dollars on that one. And it's just a matter of like getting taking that prejudice and turning it around and saying like, yeah, because people are so excited about games, it's a good opportunity to use it as an educational means. And I think this is something that I love that you are in that space and that lots of people are starting to do that right now to get it away from that like niche market thinking and going into like, it's just happening. People are playing games anyway, so we might as well teach them something while they do it.
And what you just said, like there, for instance, like the topic about violence or the mass shootings, there's so many studies showing those things wrong. So there's actually science behind that. As for addiction, there are certain games. Some of them, like I would also go so far, some of them are very close to gambling. And those are things we also need to talk about and have especially regulations and rethink a little bit this concept, like also dark patterns do exist also in the gaming world. So how do we deal with that? And of course, those are conversations we need to have for those specific games. But I want to underline that there are so many games out there, especially in the realm of indie games. And like it's very lovely to see that the indie world is growing like crazy. And there are also studies which do show that certain games, and I could call like so many. I could name so many fun indie games which would have, for instance, this cozy game character, which are very good for your mental health, for instance. So also Oxford studies show that games like Animal Crossing can be very good for your mental health. So there's super interesting benefits also. And I'm not talking only about educational games, like also our like traditional entertainment games do have a very like have interesting benefits. And I think we need to educate people how many games are out there, how many different types, and also like 2 hour experiences, which are then done are super lovely, like fun one evening a week entertainment possibilities, maybe for the whole family. And I think this is what we need to communicate, that there's not only these games and these games, but it's a whole spectrum, and there could be some of them which are really good for you. And one thing I need to underline here, there are so many interesting games also which could be good for older people as well. So they're which are good for the brain, which are good to keeping in touch through social interactions and so forth. So I think also there's this wording of senior gaming. I'm not sure if I do like this wording, but again, also the target groups are being widened up like crazy. And those are the things I think we need to talk about and show a little bit the positive examples, the ones that could be good for us.
Yeah, I remember when the Nintendo came out with the where you did the movements to basically play the game, and that was used in so many homes for the elderly in England back then. Like that was very interesting. My parents wouldn't touch a computer; they basically didn't know that. I gave them a joystick, and they're like, "What the hell is that?" The keyboard was too complex. But I'm like, "Oh, how do you play tennis?" Well, you move that thing. And they're like, and then they started playing with me, and then you realize like later on you just move it faster, and you don't have to move it at all, and it gets the same movement. But that was hacking the system again. Now going back to this, there's a lot of people out there that play games and actually are excited about the game world and spend a lot of money on it. How do you think? What would be a simple way for somebody to get started, getting into the games development or into just building their first game themselves? I guess Unity, something like that would help. Or what would be your entry drug to becoming a web developer, a game developer, rather than just a gamer?
Yeah, that's a perfect question. So there are so many tools out there already. So Unity is a very powerful game engine already. So if you have already C# skills or like any programming skills, you can directly jump into Unity. There are fantastic tutorials out there. Which show you in a couple of hours how to get started. I think Unity, if you have already some skills there, it's one of the most accessible versions. This was also a huge push for the democratization of game development. Unreal, obviously, or Godot. Godot is open source, which is also nice. Something which I also like to show to people is a tool called Twine. Twine is basically you can try it out in a web browser. Like it's about interactive storytelling. Like the book you mentioned before, where you do have to go to the different pages to go to the next solution, but also the text-based adventures, like which we played in the past, or people from the people I know played in the past. No, but like the typical text adventures. Okay, you're standing in the forest and you know to go. Yeah, you already have it open. So this is Twine. Twine is a fantastic source, and you can build their nonlinear stories. Also, I think Netflix Bandersnatch was created as a starting point in there, but you can also create really fun games there. You can combine it with pictures and so on and so forth. And then you could also make entire visual novel games, interactive novel games through Twine, or RenPy is also a cool tool for that. So those are things which are super accessible. But also, you mentioned it before, tools like Minecraft. I'm not sure if I want to name Roblox now. I'll do it anyway. But they're really interesting games which you can also extend and where you can build upon. But yeah, I think especially for the WeAreDeveloper community, a tool like Unity or Twine to just goof around would be fun.
It's a shame because Bandersnatch was a great opportunity to actually make really interactive TV, and now they actually removed it from Netflix because the new player doesn't support it anymore. So
I
you
didn't know
actually,
that.
yeah, so you have to get the torrents or something to actually see the different results. I mean, the first movie to do that was the movie I saw that yesterday. So interestingly enough, Clue. You know that board game Clue? There was a movie from 1985 that actually in every cinema they would have a different ending.
Cool.
And there were like 6 different endings to that movie, and you basically and the DVD was specials then. But in the cinema, you basically could watch it on 2 different days and was 2 different movies, just the ending. But like, interesting to see that there is a generative thing as well. I also want to go back to one thing at the very beginning that you said, like that you can go to my World of Warcraft, and battle people's imaginary dragons. How many non-imaginary dragons do you know?
I'm very confused.
They're all imaginary. Or are they?
Okay.
the question. I was like, do you know things we don't know? Like, are there magical working drugs that we haven't seen yet?
I see where you're going, but I cannot talk about this.
I can't talk to muggles about that kind of stuff. But yeah, this was lovely. This was very interesting. We might have a Women in Tech special coming up as well of this show, and a coffee with developers. So basically, because one of our customers was actually saying like we need to bring that up again. That topic might be interesting to get you on the hook for that one as well, because there's still so much to fight, and it's just super annoying to a degree. So we are much over time again, although we planned not to do that. But it's always great to talk to you, Johanna. So what's one last thing from you for the audience here? Like, what would you want people to get started with? What do you want people to stop doing?
Try things out. I think we already started with this hacking and this experimenting in games. And when I was on stage at the WeAreDevelopers conference, I was actually mostly like blown away when I asked a question: who actually got into development because of playing video games? And it was so many people raising their hands. And this is something which really always gets me thinking that, again, this is such a really cool place to experiment, to be creative. And I truly think and believe that we as developers, we are so creative in so many ways. We can create entire worlds with everything which is in our head, make it through coding visible to others. And games are such a very interesting visual way to do so. So I can just like encourage everyone to go crazy, try out different tools to develop games and be as creative as possible, because I want to play more fun games.
Yeah, I want to add to that like, don't think of it of just a way to make money. That's the thing that annoyed me the most when the whole vibe coding came around, and the first thing he did was this game with a plane where basically he can sell bits as advertising. And I'm like, no, just think about it. Think about a different way to steer that plane. Think about things, I don't know, non-imaginary dragons coming towards you. You know, like don't think of it as like, how do I make money with that thing? But just basically like play with it. And I mean, I messed with games, and that got me into my career. And now I'm at the end of my career, I guess soon. And no, not really. But I mean, I have people to code for me, and I code for fun now. And that's something that I always wanted to achieve. I started coding for fun, and now I end up coding for fun and not for a living. And that's something that you can have a career by being excited about what you do, not about the goal of like selling it for so and so many millions for the next company. Dan, what's your last word?
I'd just like to add one more thing to the list of things that are going to come out before GTA 6, which is Johanna's talk from the World Congress, which is going to be in. How's that for a segue, by the way? That was not bad, was it? No. Johanna's session from the World Congress is going to be in the newsletter on Friday. So wearedevelopers.com/devdigest, and that's where you're going to get it in your inbox Friday morning.
And if you have money to spare, and we talked about indie gaming before, I spend a lot of money on games and supported them on Indiegogo and these kind of things. There's so many cool things happening there, and getting people to have a bit of peace of mind to be able to actually think about the game. I mean, I don't know the name right now, but there was a point-and-click adventure, much like Maniac mentioned, that was basically a few years ago on Indiegogo, and when you play it, my voice is actually on one of the telephone answering machines in that game, because I was a supporter on Indiegogo, so that was quite fun as well to get your own thing coming out that way. So help the people to become more creative, but also just be creative yourself. There's so many great things you can do these days. Thanks again, Johanna. That was amazing. Thanks again, Dan. Thanks again, Vince, for doing the technology bits behind us. And I guess that's us for lunch break now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.